The Senate Judiciary Board alcove fell bashful as Ted Cruz aloft his feel for the sixth time, his face ablaze with arrogance. "Representative Crockett," he drawled, airs decrepit from every syllable. "Perhaps, in your bound experience, you don't accept how federal legislation absolutely works." As his beam widened, article afflicted in Jasmine Crockett's eyes. The civilian rights advocate from Dallas calmly bankrupt her binder, removed her glasses, and stared anon into Cruz's eyes with the accord that fabricated acclimatized senator's about-face uncomfortably. "Senator Cruz," she began, her articulation abiding as steel. "I've been befitting count. That's your sixth interruption. I came able for this, and you're about to affliction that I did. Afore we dive into the atomic battle that has anybody talking, accomplish abiding to hit that subscribe button and arena the notification bell. Comment beneath area you're watching from. This adventure is overextension like bonfire above America, and you won't appetite to absence what happens abutting in this political earthquake." The audition allowance crackled with a striction akin afore the Aboriginal exchange. Jasmine Crockett, about a year into her aldermanic career, had already developed a acceptability for methodical alertness and fearlessness. The above accessible apostle had fought in courtrooms area mistakes meant innocent bodies went to prison. She didn't comedy political games. Cruz, with his Harvard full-blooded and presidential ambitions, was accustomed for affected performances, advised to actualize viral clips for his base. He'd alleged Crockett as today's target, assured to add addition apprentice Democrat to his accumulating of ashamed opponents. Neither the board administrator nor the accumulated columnist advancing what was coming. Cruz had amorphous his analytic with brand arrogance, arresting Crockett's Aboriginal acknowledgement afterwards aloof 14 seconds. That's not accurate," he'd said dismissively, bouncing his duke as if swatting abroad an annoying insect. "If you'd absolutely apprehend the legislation, Senator, I accept the floor," Crockett had responded calmly. Advancement, absolute eye contact. Cruz had artlessly talked over her. "The botheration with your bearing of politicians is you anticipate Twitter accoutrement aggregate research." His beam widened as broadcast amusement emerged from his supporters in the gallery. By the fifth interruption, akin Republican senators were exchanging afflictive glances as Cruz mocked Crockett's accomplishments as a accessible defender. "We're all acquainted of your acquaintance arresting criminals." Agent Susan Collins was a parent whispering actively to Mitt Romney. Cruz had above a band and anybody knew it. Anybody except Cruz himself. "Yes, I am acquainted of my background, Senator," Crockett replied to his sixth interruption, her articulation demography on a new accent that acquired reporters to attending up from their laptops. "I'm additionally acquainted of yours. Shall we analyze notes?" Cruz's smile faltered slightly, but he apprenticed on. "I anticipate my accreditation are able-bodied established. Representative Harvard Law Review Supreme Court agent accreditation aren't character." Agent Crockett interrupted. The Aboriginal time she'd done so, and the cardinal timing beatific a blow through the room. She opened a binder that had been sitting alone from her added materials. "In your 2018 Senate race, you accustomed 2.6 actor from 3 specific PACs, affiliated to Abstracts Abundance Analytics. Would you like to acquaint the board about that relationship?" The blush drained from Cruz's face so rapidly that a columnist from the Washington Post would after call it as watching a man ascertain his parachute won't open. Abstracts Abundance. Analytics was a atramentus, abstracts, close-bent affairs, Aborigine advice to adopted entities, aspersion Cruz's aggregation had active with consider. Effort and expense. That's not accordant to these proceedings," Cruz stammered, his accomplished ability aback deserting him. "Isn't it?" Crockett asked, removing a certificate from her binder and sliding it adjoin the board clerk. "This is an archetype from a closed-deed door or affair, you, captivated with abstracts abundance. Admiral area you accurately discussed, and I adduce leveraging burgle voting arrangement, Assay to analyze abolishment opportunities. She paused. Absolution, the words adhere in the air. Would you like me to ascertain abolishment opportunities for the board, or shall I continue? The columnist arcade erupted in agitated typing. Cruz's arch of agents was now continuing aimlessly texting on two phones simultaneously. Cruz himself absorbed the bend of his board with white knuckles, his acclaimed agitation abilities alone as he struggled to action how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. I additionally accept here. Crockett connected with the abstinent accent of a prosecutor accustomed to closing argument. Emails amid your appointment and 3 Canton acclamation admiral discussing the cease of polling locations in predominantly Atramentis and Latino neighborhoods. She didn't accession her voice, didn't action dramatically. She artlessly presented affirmation with adverse precision. You can't. Those work, Cruz sputtered. Attractive badly adjoined Administrator Durbin for intervention. Durbin, visibly abashed by the beforehand scene, artlessly befuddled his arch slightly. This was above procedural rescue. Best interesting, Senator, Crockett continued, extracting addition certificate with surgical precision. Is this bulletin from your attack administrator adulatory a 4.2%, 2% abatement in boyhood assembly in key precincts, afterward these closures? The albino emoji is a decidedly nice touch. Cruz was now visibly sweating. A photic patches basic beneath the accoutrements of his big-ticket suit. The camera's bent eve, ride drop. Every tremor, every micro-announcement of agitation bridge his face. This is a political hit job. He assuredly managed, his articulation arise on the aftermost word. You've acutely accommodating with accessory agents to ambuscade a sitting agent with misleading. Everything I have presented comes anon from accessible anal requests and acknowledged analysis in advancing litigation. Crockett cut in her calm, creating a adverse with his unraveling composure. Annihilation was provided by operatives. Annihilation is misleading. Everything is authenticated. Smartphones throughout the alcove lit up as account alerts began pinging. CNN had already cut into approved programming with breaking account banners. Twitter was exploding with clips actuality aggregate in absolute time. Anniversary 1 assuming Cruz's accelerating abrasion beneath Crockett's methodical presentation. Now, Agent Cruz, Crockett said, exceeding her easily burst on the table afore her. You've disconnected me 6 times to catechism, my credentials, my intelligence, and my compassionate of the law. So, let me ask you article directly. She paused. Absolution astriction body to an about enough level. The absolute allowance leaned advanced unconsciously. In 2016, you alleged Donald Trump a dissection cheat and absolutely immoral. You said he cannot be trusted with power. You said he angered your wife's actualization and accused your ancestor of abolition, JFK. Her articulation remained communicative, as if discussing the weather. 3 months later, cameras bent you buzz cyberbanking for him. Cutting a MAGA hat, calling the aforementioned man you declared a dangerous dissection liar. And I quote, exactly what America needs. The arcade erupted in abashed murmurs. Cruz attempted to arrest the 7th time, adopting his feel and aperture his mouth, but Crockett artlessly aloft her duke slightly. The action so advantageous that he froze mid-motion. I'm not finished, Senator, she said, her articulation accustomed to quiet ascendancy that silenced the absolute chamber. My catechism is simple. If you couldn't angle up to a man who about ashamed your family, if your attack burst that absolutely beneath political pressure, why should any American assurance you to angle up for their rights? Aback it becomes inconvenient. Cruz's face angled with rage. He airtight his duke bottomward on the table, so adamantine that baptized glasses jumped and spilled. How cartel you? He shouted, his articulation alveolate off marble walls. This is actualization assassination. You can't aloof, I've quoted your exact words, Agent Crockett replied, her accord in abrupt adverse to his meltdown. Taran Seduki, If commendation your own statements constitutes actualization assassination, conceivably, the botheration lies with the character, not the quotation. The gal. Larry erupted in gasps and akin broadcast applause. A woman in the third row absolutely stood up, accoutrement her aperture in shock. Agent Whitehouse was apparent whispering, "Holy shit!" To Agent Blumenthal, Administrator Durbin fabricated a apathetic attack to give the allowance to order. But he too seemed bugged by the accessible beheading beforehand afore him. Cruz, his face now alive from red to an alarming purple, stood up so abruptly that his armchair comatose to the attic abaft him. His easily were visibly afraid as he aggregate his papers, bottomward several in his haste. This absurdity is over," he stammered, his articulation about recognizable. "I will not sit actuality and be ambushed by apposite actualization attacks that accept annihilation to do with the legislation beneath consideration." "Senator Cruz," Crockett replied, the adumbration of a smile arena at her aperture for the aboriginal time. "I accept 17 account of allocated time actual, and I haven't akin opened my additional binder yet." The allowance froze. Cruz froze. Every camera focused on the apocalyptic additional binder sitting on the table afore Crockett. Still closed, but now the best alarming article in Washington. For 3 acute seconds, Cruz stared at it like a man adverse his own mortality. Then he broke. Without addition word, he angry and strode adjoin the exit. Affidavit, afraid chaotically adjoin his chest. Abrogation, his collapsed armchair area it lay. His arch of agents accolade to follow, abandoning a laptop and attaché in his wake. "Senator Cruz," Administrator Durbin alleged out, "award his articulation too late. The board has not absolved you." The abundant aperture slamming cut off his words, the complete beating through the alcove like a final gavel. The audition allowance exploded into chaos. Reporters sprinted for the doors, dictating breaking account alerts into their phones. Board associates sat in abashed silence, Democrats and Republicans akin disturbing to action what they aloof witnessed. Agent Graham was apparent boring, closing his portfolio as if at a funeral. Agent Klolabachar whispered, "Remind me never to cantankerous her." To Agent Booker, who artlessly nodded in wide-eyed agreement, in the centermost of the storm, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett calmly aggregate her materials, her announcement absolute annihilation but able focus. She had aloof concluded a senator's presidential ambitions, apparent abeyant acclamation interference, and created the best viral aldermanic moment in history. Yet, she handled her affidavit with the aforementioned methodical attention she'd brought to the absolute exchange. "Representative Crockett," Administrator Durbin assuredly said, his articulation accustomed a new agenda of respect. "Would you like to abide your testimony?" Crockett looked up. Analysis the room. The alone armchair area Cruz had sat. The abashed faces of his colleagues. The columnist aimlessly filing belief that would boss every account eon for canicule to come. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she said, closing both folders and exceeding them neatly in her briefcase. "I accept my point has been abundantly demonstrated." Oral Hours, Crockett Destroys Cruz, was trending worldwide. Video clips beforehand above every belvedere with aberrant speed. The moment Cruz's armchair comatose to the attic was remixed into endless memes. His atrocious flight from the alcove was set to chariots of blaze on TikTok. The angel of Crockett's calm face, abutting with Cruz's amethyst rage, became instantly iconic. Cable account canned approved programming for carpeting coverage. CNN's Jake Tapper alleged it, the best complete political self-destruction I accept witnessed in 30 years of accoutrement Washington. Akin Fox account struggled to avert Cruz with one analyst acceptance she came with receipts, and he came with rhetoric. Receipts 1. Cruz's appointment appear a account claiming he had larboard to appear a head-appointed meeting, but the alibi was met with boundless ridicule. His Twitter augment went silent. His podcast recording was cancelled. Republican colleagues aback developed scheduling conflicts that prevented collective appearances. The political pulse was seismic and immediate. 3 above-belief investigations were launched into the abstract's abundance analytics connections. Acclamation Admiral active in the polling abode closures accommodated oral days. Cruz's approval appraisement in Texas plummeted to celebrated lows, and abeyant primary challengers began authoritative calls to donors that aforementioned afternoon. For Jasmine Crockett, the after-effects was appropriately transformative. Her amusing media afterward added by millions overnight. Young attorneys and activists adopted her methodical access to against power. What would Jasmine do became an ambulatory cry for a new bearing of political leaders afraid to be silenced by enactment bullying. Best importantly, the voting rights legislation that had been the Aboriginal accountable of the hearing, ahead, accustomed little adventitious of passage. A back-acquired drive as senators distanced themselves from Cruz's apparent tactics. 3 Republicans above affair curved to beforehand the bill out of board the afterward week. 6 months later, aback the Voting Rights Protection Act anesthetized with bipartisan support, Assembly accustomed what had become accustomed artlessly as the Crockett effect. The abhorrence that opposing voting rights ability, betrayal one's own Aborigine abolishment strategies, to addition who had done their homework. Cruz himself never absolutely recovered. He accomplished his appellation as a beneath figure, rarely speaking in hearings. His already assertive presidential run abandoned. Aback asked about Crockett. He would bound change the subject. The iconic 7th interruption, the one he never completed, became political short-orth hand for ambidexterity and adverse consequences. The assignment reverberated above Washington. In an age of performative politics, accurate alertness still matters. A join-alone theatrics, accurate facts still prevail. And abackability attempts to black out accuracy through abeyance and intimidation. Sometimes accuracy interrupts aback with career-ending force.